The night wind slithered through thick, heavy leaves, sweeping across Hollow Creek Road, a road that had lain in silence for years. Jonah never imagined he'd return to this town, much less attend his grandfather's funeral, for a man he hadn't seen in nearly a decade. The car halted right in front of a lonely, two-story wooden house at the end of the road. There were no electric lights. Only the silent glow of the moon spilled over the porch, where his grandfather once spent his afternoons, with a lukewarm cup of coffee. Jonah lugged his suitcase up the steps and stepped inside. There was no welcome waiting for him. Only the musty scent of old wood and a trace of lingering cooking smoke filled the air. On the table, a handwritten letter lay neatly, the bold script of his grandfather still vivid. "Jonah, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. Take care of what's behind the house. And do not try to understand it if you are not ready." Jonah folded the letter. He knew exactly what "what's behind the house" meant. The largest ancient tree in the area, unsteadily perched at the edge of a slope, where an event occurred that no family member ever mentioned again. As a child, Jonah had heard the wind scream like a banshee from the backyard during raging storms. That ancient tree, with its towering, ominous presence and roots clawing up from the ground like petrified talons, was a presence he had never dared approach alone. But his grandfather was different. He had always lingered there, tending to the tree as if it were a sick child. No one could fathom why. Once Jonah had asked him, "What is so special about this tree that you gaze at it like that?" His grandfather merely smiled. "Not every tree grows from sunshine and rain, son. Some trees thrive on what people choose to hide." Back then, Jonah didn't understand. But now, each word echoed in his mind like a vague, persistent knocking at his door. After the funeral, the town remained eerily silent. Visitors came and left without lingering. A few eyed Jonah strangely, not with sympathy, but as though they were silently judging whether he remembered something. Jonah wandered around the house. The backyard lay in ruins, with grass growing well above knee level. The old swing still hung there, a rotted rope that swayed in the breeze as if someone were sitting on it. That evening he dined alone. The food was cold, yet he finished every bite. His grandfather had once said, "Eating alone is a way to see if you still fear loneliness." On the first night after the funeral, Jonah could not sleep. The wind battered the windows as if someone were knocking. The creaking hinges sighed like a weary exhale. He rose, threw on a jacket, and stepped out into the backyard. In the darkness, the ancient tree loomed menacingly. Its bark, ashen and skeletal, was marred by long black scars that resembled deep wounds. Beneath its base lay a small hollow where years ago he had glimpsed something shimmering, but he had never dared to get too close. He stood there, silent. A chill, not born of the wind but of memories, sent shivers down his spine. Inside the house, the kitchen light suddenly flickered on. A sharp click resounded, as though a switch had been flipped. Yet Jonah was still outside. The house sat empty. The tree remained, a silent sentinel. And then he began to remember the things he had spent 20 years trying to forget. A long-forgotten dream rushed back, young Jonah darting through this very garden, calling out someone's name, until he suddenly froze. A scream, a storm, a blinding light that shattered the night. And then, the silence, so profound it was almost unbelievable that it had ever existed. Jonah stepped back several paces, feeling as if the very roots of the tree were staring right at him. "It can't be," he murmured, then turned away, though his steps slowed noticeably. It was as if, in the nocturnal wind, someone was softly whispering his name from deep beneath the earth. The next morning, the sky was ashen, like a thin layer of soot had settled over the rooftops and the wild field behind the house. Jonah woke with swollen eyes, unsure if it was from lack of sleep or something else, something vague and weighty pressing down on him. He made his way to the kitchen, where his grandfather used to brew coffee every morning, always with so much sugar that his grandmother had once called it deadly sweet. Now only the old kettle sat silently atop the gas stove. Jonah poured water, lit the flame, and waited for the quiet bubbling to begin. He looked out the window, toward the tree. It stood there, unchanged. But now he had a feeling. Last night hadn't been a dream. Something had stirred a part of his memory that had long been buried. After a half-hearted breakfast, Jonah decided to head down to the basement. That's where his grandfather had left behind piles of old things, boxes of books, tape recorders, maps of the town, and items no one had ever been allowed to touch. The basement door creaked loudly. A dim light cast shadows down the wooden steps. The smell of dust and rotting timber mingled thick in the air. Jonah found a small chest, the lock rusted over. On top was a piece of paper taped down. "Do not open unless you're sure you're ready." He hesitated, then gave a dry chuckle. What the hell does ready even mean? Jonah broke the lock. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, a broken-faced pocket watch, and a stack of black and white photos. He picked up the notebook. The first page bore a familiar handwriting. Hollow Creek, summer of 1998. The first storm, and the night Jonah stopped speaking to his father. Jonah froze. His hand trembled slightly. The wind from the night before, the buried memories, and his father. Everything was beginning to align. He sat on the cold wooden floor, flipping through the pages. Jonah didn't know it, but that night when he screamed in the dark, I saw something in his eyes, like he'd seen a ghost. That tree, it called to him. I don't know what it said, but he was never the same after that. The following pages recounted the strange event that year, how Jonah had gone missing for more than 3 hours during the storm and was found unconscious beneath the tree. No one could explain what had happened. When he woke up, the boy said nothing. No tears, no explanation. Wouldn't even meet anyone's eyes, not even his father's. Jonah's mother had screamed and begged to leave Hollow Creek. But the grandfather insisted on staying, for one reason only. Something needs watching. No one ever really understood what he meant. And everything faded into silence, except for Jonah. Jonah left the basement with the notebook clutched tight. The sun still hadn't broken through the clouds. The air carried a strange scent, like freshly turned soil or rain ready to fall. He walked into the backyard. This time, he didn't just stare. He stepped closer to the tree. Placing a hand on the coarse bark, he could feel a deep crack like something had once pierced it. "What did you hide here, Grandpa?" His hand moved down into the hollow and touched something cold and metallic. A small tin box. Rusted, the latch bent out of shape. Jonah opened it. Inside was a piece of paper, folded in quarters. "If you're reading this, the tree has chosen you. It doesn't kill, but it remembers those who tried to kill the truth. Deke, if you dare." Jonah looked up. The wind picked up, carrying a sound that might have been laughter or a moan. He clenched the tin box, eyes locked on the tree roots gently quivering like a breath. Across town, thunder rolled in the distance. The storm was coming back to Hollow Creek. Jonah returned to the porch and sat in his grandfather's old wicker chair. He opened the notebook again. On the last page was a scrawled note in red ink, rushed and uneven. "The tree isn't the only one that knows the secret. Hazel knows what happened that year, too. She once told me everything started at house number 27 at the end of Pineview Street. Don't believe what it says, look for what it hides." Jonah jotted down the address. Hazel, a name he'd nearly forgotten. The woman who lived alone with 17 cats, once his grandmother's best friend. She used to tell Jonah strange stories about Hollow Creek, but no one in the family ever let him get close to her. "You should go see her." His grandfather's voice echoed in Jonah's mind, or at least the memory of it did. Jonah took a long breath and stared out at the yard. The tree was still there, like a living thing waiting. But if the tree remembered, who else was waiting for Jonah to remember too? Jonah left the house while the sky was still a faint pre-dawn gray. He wanted to reach house number 27 at the end of Pineview Street before the rain came down. Gray clouds drifted like a spreading ink blot across the sky. Pineview Street curled narrowly through shadowed trees, dark as charcoal sketches. Jonah remembered this road once echoed with children's laughter, but now only the wind moved through shuttered homes. Number 27 sat at the very end, with a crooked wooden fence and a house number sign hanging askew. He knocked. No answer came. Just as he turned to leave, the door creaked open with a groan like someone sighing in pain. Hazel appeared, small frame, silver hair flowing, and eyes exactly as Jonah remembered them. "I knew the day would come when you came back." She said it calmly, turning and walking inside without asking who he was. Jonah followed. The house was coated in dust, walls cracked, and the air heavy with lavender and stale tobacco. Cats were sprawled across every surface, yet all were eerily silent, as if listening. "Your grandfather said you knew something." "About the tree, about 1998. Hazel stopped in front of the cold fireplace. On the mantel sat a faded photo frame, 3 people, Jonah's grandfather, a young Hazel, and an unfamiliar man. "We tried digging that tree up once, but not deep enough. Not brave enough." Jonah swallowed hard. "What did they bury under it, ma'am?" Hazel turned, her gaze cutting straight through him. "Not what who?" Silence fell thick. "A child went missing that year. No records were kept. Police stayed out of it. The parents moved away soon after." Jonah stepped back. Was it the child of the man in the photo?" Hazel nodded. "Jonah, you were the only one who saw what happened that night. But you were too young. And fear did the rest." Outside the window, the storm began to rise. Thunder growled from afar. Trees jerked and twisted like being pulled by unseen hands. "Do you want to know the truth?" Hazel asked. Jonah clenched his fists. I need to know." She handed him a blurred photograph, printed on old film. In it stood the ancient tree, but it looked different. Its roots were torn up and a small hand protruded from the dirt. No one believed. We buried it again. packed the earth back down. Because if we didn't, the truth would have driven the town mad. Jonah fell quiet, and the tree started growing after that, but not from rainwater. A clap of thunder exploded overhead. A picture frame crashed from the wall, startling Jonah. Hazel sat in her chair, eyes deep with shadow. "You can leave, Jonah. Pretend you never came back. But if you choose to dig, you must be ready to carry it all. The truth and the darkness." Jonah rose. He said nothing more. But he knew Hollow Creek had kept this secret too long. And now the tree was demanding its memories back. He left house number 27. Rain had begun to fall. Drop by drop, the soil of the past began to soften. On his way home, Jonah stopped by the Old Town General Store. The shopkeeper, an old man named Marcus, saw him and gave a silent nod. But as Jonah stepped out the door, the man called softly, "You look just like your grandfather. That same look in your eye, the one that used to haunt folks." Jonah paused. "You know what happened, don't you?" Marcus glanced around, then took a drag from his cigarette. "I saw them dig. That night, Hazel, your grandpa, and a man I don't dare name anymore. After that, the tree grew like crazy. Spring stopped arriving on time. Hens laid blood-brown eggs. Kids cried through the night. And you vanished." Jonah stood frozen. "Do you believe that tree is alive?" Marcus let out a dry laugh. "I don't know what lives, but some things don't die. They wait." That afternoon, Jonah walked home in the rain. Every step felt like sinking into memory. He stopped at the wooden fence and looked at the ancient tree. A black crow perched on the highest branch let out a raspy call. Then silence. Beneath the falling rain, the tree seemed to grow even taller. And tonight, Jonah would have to dream the dream he'd been running from for 20 years. That night, as the clock neared midnight, Jonah jolted awake to the sound of rolling thunder. He couldn't remember when he'd fallen asleep, but his body was drenched in cold sweat. The room was pitch black, lit only by the flashes of lightning casting his panicked reflection in the mirror. He stepped out of bed, trembling hands grabbing a small flashlight. The wind howled outside the window like someone crying out in agony. From deep inside his mind, a voice echoed again and again. "Jonah, Jonah, you saw it. You saw that night." He opened the back door, letting the freezing wind slap him in the face. The tree, the root of it all, loomed beneath the lightning, towering and dreadful. Without thinking, his feet moved forward. No thoughts. No reasons. His body knew it had to return to where everything began. Summer, 1998. Jonah was just a 7-year-old boy. That night, too, a storm had raged. He had run away from home for a silly reason. His parents were fighting. He ran to the tree, the one his grandfather had forbidden him from going near. He couldn't recall what had drawn him. All he knew was when he got there, beneath the lightning, another small figure was crouched at the base of the tree. A little girl. Unfamiliar, faceless, unnamed. He only remembered the bone-deep chill rising from the ground. The child turned to Jonah, but had no eyes. No mouth. Just a smooth, unfinished face, like a sketch left undone. Jonah had screamed, but no sound came out. A crash of thunder swallowed it whole. And then the darkness swallowed everything. Now, in the current storm, Jonah stood there again. Beneath the tree, the old memory returned like a nightmare he'd never truly woken from. He knelt down, hands groping through the earth inch by inch. Cold, wet, but unmistakably real. His fingers brushed something soft, like old fabric. He dug it out, a child's ribbon, rotted but still faintly pink. His throat tightened. His heart pounded. A child's voice rang behind him. "Jonah, you finally remembered." He spun around. No one there. Just tree, rain, and wind. But he knew. The memory wasn't shattered anymore. It was alive. Jonah stood. His face pale, but his eyes clear. The storm of 1998 hadn't just taken a child. It had taken the truth from an entire town, and his own childhood along with it. He looked at the tree one last time. "I'm not digging you up tonight. But this time, I won't run." A bolt of lightning tore across the sky, and the base of the tree shivered like it had just nodded. Jonah walked slowly around the trunk, his shoes sinking lightly into the softened mud from the endless rain. Each step stirred something sleeping beneath the roots. He didn't just see the faceless girl anymore. He heard himself as a child, laughter, calls for his mother, and the sobbing in the night no one ever answered. On the far side of the trunk, where lightning barely touched, there was a faint carving, 3 letters, J-H. He placed his hand over them. A piece of himself, of the past, of someone who had once been a friend. Or maybe the one who disappeared. Maybe it was that child. Maybe someone else. A black cat appeared, from nowhere. It walked slowly toward him, golden eyes glowing through the rain. Jonah crouched down. "How long have you been out here?" The cat just sat, stared at him, then turned back toward the house. Jonah stood. Something had shifted. As if the storm hadn't just come to soak the ground, but to stir what had been buried. An image surfaced in Jonah's mind. His father, whose voice he barely remembered, once standing before this very tree, shouting in a heated argument with his grandfather. His father's hand gripped a shovel while the old man stood protectively in front of the roots, as if guarding something more precious than life. He knew, but he couldn't bear it. So he left, without even saying goodbye. Jonah whispered, almost to himself. He returned to the house, opened a small notebook, and began to write the dream he just relived. He no longer wanted to forget. For the first time in 20 years, Jonah let himself remember. And he knew tomorrow night, or maybe sooner, he'd return with a pick and shovel. He would dig, and this time, not to bury something, but to bring it into the light. The next morning, the sky remained overcast and the air was so thick it felt like all of Hollow Creek was holding its breath. Jonah woke early, gripping the notebook he'd written in the night before, and stepped quietly out of the house. His steps were heavy, but his eyes were resolute. He stopped by the shed behind the garden where his grandfather once kept all the gardening tools. There, beneath a dust-covered tarp, was an old but sturdy shovel. He picked it up, wiped off the dry dirt, and carried it to the tree. The wind began to pick up. The tall branches clashed, groaning like something in pain. The tree stood still, but it felt like it was watching. Jonah began to dig. Every swing of the shovel struck thick, wet earth, heavy with age. Each impact felt like cutting into memory. In his mind, echoes swirled, his grandfather's voice, Hazel's warning, and the laughter of that faceless little girl. A strange sound surfaced. Jonah paused, listening. Not the wind. It was a faint scratching from below the earth. But he kept going, digging deeper. After nearly an hour, his shovel hit something solid. Not stone, wood. Jonah dropped to his knees and brushed away the mud. A small chest. Worn oak, iron lock rusted but intact. He pulled it up, breath shallow and quick. No key needed. The lock snapped open more easily than he expected. Inside, a decayed layer of brown silk. Jonah peeled it back. A doll. Red hair, pink dress, one eye missing. Beneath the doll, a folded piece of paper. He opened it, a trembling handwritten note. Jonah, if you've found this, don't let it come back. The tree kept it. Don't let it out. A chill ran through him. He felt cold eyes on his back, something watching. He turned. No one, but the cat from last night was there again. This time, it wasn't looking at him. It stared at the chest and took a few cautious steps back. Jonah shut the lid, cradled the box, and backed out of the hole. He didn't know why his grandfather buried it or who wrote the note. But one thing was clear. Something didn't want to be unearthed. That night, he placed the chest on the kitchen table and cleaned off the mud. Then he picked up his phone, found Hazel's old number, and dialed. Her voice was weak but lucid. You dug it up? I found a doll. And a warning. Said it mustn't come back. Silence on the other end. The missing girl, she always carried that doll. Her name was Mary. But the name doesn't matter as much as this. Her spirit never left the tree. And now you've opened the way. The kitchen grew colder. Wind slipped through the cracks in the door. The cat jumped to the windowsill and let out a sharp, warning cry. What do I do, ma'am? Put it back, before the full moon rises. If not, Hollow Creek will remember, and this time, no one will be able to forget. The call ended. Jonah sat there, staring at the chest, at the soulless doll, and the warning etched in trembling ink. Wind howled through the branches, and from the yard, a faint giggle echoed through the night that was falling faster than usual. When night fell again, Jonah couldn't sleep. He brought the chest into the living room, set it on the table like it was both sacred and dangerous. Every flicker of the fireplace made it seem like the doll blinked. But no, it had to be a trick of the light, right? He flipped through his grandfather's journal again, searching for any mention of Mary. Finally, near the end, he stopped on a page. The day she disappeared, it rained hard. She took the doll, said the tree was calling her. I ran after her, but I was too late. I heard her scream, then laughter. Not a child's laugh. Something older, deeper. The tree took her soul, just like it holds the memory of this entire town. Jonah's hand trembled. Below that line, in dark red ink, his grandfather had written, "If you read this, don't let the tree remember." Footsteps on the wooden floor. Jonah looked up, alert. Not the cat. Not the wind. Someone, or something, was walking inside the house. He grabbed his flashlight, moved slowly down the hallway. The beam lit old pictures along the walls, reflecting his shadow, and another, smaller, just behind him, slipping past and vanishing. Jonah whipped around. Nothing. "Mary," he whispered. No response. The wind outside seemed to echo a soft whisper. "Jonah." When he returned to the living room, the chest was open. The doll was gone. Jonah stepped back. The lights flickered like a bulb on the edge of burning out. He aimed his flashlight into the corner of the room. Under the chair, a small muddy footprint was stamped on the wooden floor. He stepped forward, knelt and touched it, still wet, still fresh. A cold breath ghosted across the back of his neck. He turned, flashlight catching the mirror, and in the glass behind him was the girl. No eyes, no mouth. Doll in hand. Pale as bone. Jonah screamed, dropping the flashlight. When he picked it up again, she was gone. He panted, body shaking, heart thundering like a war drum. He collapsed into the chair, clutching his head. "You have to end this, Jonah, before it starts again." The wind chimes outside rang steadily. The moon began to push through the clouds, nearly full. Very close, and in the silent yard the tree began to tremble once more. The full moon hung in the sky like an unblinking eye. The wind came in bursts, rattling the windows with long, aching groans. Jonah sat motionless before the fireplace, long gone cold. He couldn't remember the last time Hollow Creek had a night this long, or maybe that night had never ended at all, just gone quiet like a wandering soul. The doll hadn't returned. But the signs had. The wall clock stopped at 3:33 a.m. His grandmother's portrait fell from the wall, glass shattered, and the eyes in the painting were slashed across. Small things, but chilling. Jonah wasn't afraid anymore. He'd faced the worst nightmare of all, his own memory. Now he just wanted to finish what he'd started, to give the town peace and himself as well. He carried the empty chest out into the yard, set it down beneath a tree. "Mary," he whispered, "if you're still here, let me help." No answer, but the ground shuddered softly, like a sigh. Jonah stood there, body trembling from the wind, from the cold, from something invisible swirling around him like mist. He could feel it, that gaze from the tree. Not from its leaves or bark, but from deep beneath the soil. A small figure appeared at the edge of the yard. Dressed in white, long hair covering her face. Mary. Jonah didn't step back. He just waited. The girl drew closer. No sound. No rustle of leaves. Just silence, thick, suffocating silence. A few steps away, she stopped. "I didn't want to be forgotten," the voice came, not from her lips, but echoing inside Jonah's head. "I only wanted to be remembered as a child, not as something buried." Jonah knelt, placed his hand on the earth. "I'm sorry. No one deserves to be forgotten like that. Do you want me to lay you back where you were?" She nodded. A small gesture, slow and soft as wind. He stepped forward and opened the chest. When he turned back, Mary was gone. But the doll was there, lying beside the tree, wet from the rain yet eerily clean, like someone had wiped it down. Jonah placed it in the chest. This time he wrapped it tightly with cloth and covered it by hand. No shovel, no digging. Just silence, as if burying a loved one. As he stood, the wind died. The full moon slipped behind the clouds. And the tree, for the first time since his return, stopped trembling. Jonah walked back to the house. The house was strangely quiet. No footsteps, no pale faces in mirrors. Just darkness and the peace he hadn't known in 20 years. He went upstairs, opened the window, and breathed deep. The air after rain had a particular scent. Fresh earth, rotting wood, and something faint, like a memory forgiven. As he turned back into the room, his grandfather's old letter fluttered to the floor. He picked it up and opened it again. On the back, a line he'd never read before. If you manage what Hazel and I never could, write it down. Make those who forgot Hollow Creek remember, not out of fear, but love. Jonah sat at the desk. For the first time in years, he opened his grandfather's old typewriter. A few keys were broken, but every clack echoed like a promise. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky had not yet brightened. Jonah began to write, line by line, not about Mary, but about the forgotten things. After a while, he heard soft scratching at the door. The black cat. It leapt into his lap and curled up to sleep. For the first time since he returned, it no longer looked at him with warning. Somewhere deep underground, the roots had gone still. The tree no longer stirred. And Mary, if she was still there, might finally be at peace. Jonah kept writing, his hands steady, his eyes no longer haunted. The story of Hollow Creek, and all that had been buried, was finally being told. A gentle breeze slipped through the window. The first dawn in 20 years began to glow behind the mountains. 2 weeks had passed since the night of the full moon. Hollow Creek was quiet, eerily so. No ghostly footsteps, no flickering lights, no muddy footprints appearing in the dark. The town, like someone recovering from a long fever, seemed to be sleeping off its exhaustion. Jonah stayed. He didn't return to the city, didn't leave the old house. Each day he wrote. The story of Hollow Creek grew, chapter by chapter, not to sell, but to survive. A kind of memory antibody against forgetting. One morning as Jonah brewed coffee, the doorbell rang. It was Marcus, the grocer. He didn't ask Jonah how he was. He simply placed an old yellowed envelope on the table, handwriting scrawled in violet ink. Found this in the wall while fixing the shed roof, he said. Your name's on the front. But what's inside? It's from your grandpa. Jonah opened it. A small piece of paper with familiar handwriting. Some secrets should only be told when you're ready to hear them. But if you're reading this, it means you've heard. And you've chosen. I'm proud of that. Don't let the tree be the only one that remembers. That night, Jonah went into the yard. Fire in hand, paper in pocket. He burned the note, watched it curl into ash in the first spring wind. Not to destroy, but to release. A neighborhood child passed by the fence, stopped suddenly. Mr. Jonah, that tree, it's not scary anymore. I dreamed there was a little girl sitting under it, smiling at me. Jonah smiled back. She's a kind one. Don't be afraid. The boy nodded and darted off. A single leaf drifted slowly from the highest branch, soft as a goodbye. The next afternoon, while Jonah was watering the garden, a strange woman appeared at the gate. She wore a long ash-gray coat, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing most of her face. "Are you Jonah?" "I am. What can I do for you?" She removed her glasses, her eyes steady and somber. "I'm Barry's cousin. My family used to live here. I know what happened, and I came to thank you." Jonah was speechless. She handed him an old notebook. "This, Mary wrote it when she was alive, before she disappeared. We found it in a box of old things in Portland. No one in the family ever forgot, but no one had dared return." Jonah accepted it silently. It was a small, thin notebook, childlike handwriting full of color. One drawing stood out. The ancient tree, a little girl, and someone standing beside her, perhaps young Jonah. The woman smiled. "I think she forgave you." When she left, Jonah stood on the porch for a long time. The smell of earth, of wind, of old things that had never truly died. He placed Mary's notebook next to his unfinished manuscript, as if her voice would now walk alongside his story. That evening, Jonah stopped by the small bar at the edge of town. For the first time in years, he struck up a conversation. The townspeople, hesitant at first, began to open up. Some spoke of his grandfather, others asked about the tree. An old man leaned in and whispered, "We thought you were dead like your daddy. But I've learned sometimes things are more alive than life itself. Like that tree, like memory." Jonah nodded. The beer in his hand wasn't cold, but it was enough to swallow a piece of the past. But peace never lasts forever. Because this town doesn't have just one tree. And memory, like roots, always finds a way to break through the soil and rise again. One early morning at the end of the month, while mist still clung to the treetops, Jonah stepped into the yard before sunrise. He didn't write. Didn't read. He just stood before the ancient tree, the place where it had all begun, and where, for a while, he thought it had ended. The tree was still there, silent, but no longer trembling. And for the first time, Jonah didn't feel like an outsider. He was part of Hollow Creek, part of its memory. That day, Jonah decided to do what his grandfather had once hesitated to. He went to the town library and looked for old maps of Hollow Creek. The 1893 map. On it, a faint red dot marked the southeast corner. No label, no note. Just a hand-drawn circle in ink. Jonah asked the elderly librarian, "What used to be here?" She shook her head, but her eyes faltered. "People used to call it the White Field. No one talks about it now. But there's a rumor. Before the tree at your house, there was another one here, and it was cut down." Jonah stood frozen. Another tree. Another memory. Perhaps another darkness. He dug deeper into the archives. A rare entry from 1901 described a lightning strike at what was then called the White Point. No casualties, but some witnesses claimed the earth burst open like the mouth of an ancient beast. No one dared plant anything there afterward. Leaving the library, Jonah stopped by the small bakery near the post office. The owner, Helen, a woman in her 60s and a friend of his late mother, started the conversation. "You're looking for things this town doesn't want to remember, aren't you?" Jonah nodded. She handed him a faded photo album. Inside, a black and white picture showed a group of people gathered around a patch of bare land. In the center, a felled tree stump with roots jutting up like claws. The man standing beside it. That's your grandfather. But no one remembers the event. Maybe they don't want to. Or maybe it was erased. That night, Jonah wrote the final lines of his first book. Not all memories need to be unearthed. But when a place stays silent too long, it eventually speaks for itself. Like roots breaking through soil. Like whispers carried in the wind. Hollow Creek does not have just one tree. And I, Jonah Holloway, was there the first time they whispered to each other. As he typed the final period, the black cat jumped onto the desk, stretched out across the notebook. Outside the window, a child's laughter echoed, though the street was empty. Jonah stepped onto the porch. A small scrap of paper lay at his feet, its origin unknown. Written on it, in shaky handwriting, were just 3 words. Whitefield. He looked up. Rain was coming, and Hollow Creek was beginning to remember. As he turned to go inside, a gentle spiral of wind swept across the yard. The ancient tree swayed, not in the breeze but as if responding to something. Jonah looked back at it one last time that night. "We're not done yet," he whispered. And in that moment, just barely, he felt a pulse beneath the soil. Not his own, but the roots. Something deeper had begun to waken. Appreciate you staying with us. Not everyone gets to hear the untold. If this intrigued you, drop a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to The Untold Story to uncover even more.